Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Death Chick Show. I'm Patty Burgess with my co-host, Misty Lynn, and we're talking about life and death here, and we're very excited to have a guest who's going to be talking about the after death or afterlife part of this whole journey that we're all on, like it or not. So we welcome you here today. There's lots to talk about. We've got lots of perspectives. And today we've got a wonderful guest, Linda Bachmann, and Misty's going to introduce her. And we're going to hear a lot of the kinds of pressing questions that you've had maybe in your mind. Maybe you voiced them. But all the kinds of things that inquiring minds want to know. So thrilled to have you. And let's get started. Misty, over to you.
Great, thanks, Patty. So I'm going to introduce Linda, and then we'll jump. Very pleased and honored to have Dr. Linda Bachmann with us today. She's a licensed psychologist and a regression therapist. Linda's been in practice for almost 40 years, and the driving force of Linda's work is her profound commitment to deepening and heightening our awareness as an individual about the soul work that we do here on Earth and why we're here. So her work is really about the broader perspective of things in life, and that's why the Death Chicks talk about death, is so that we can live more fully in our lives here on Earth. I'm going to start, Linda, with something one of your colleagues posted on your website in regards to your book, your first book, bringingyoursoultolight.com. And he said that your regression clients tend to be with more highly advanced souls, and that one of your main conclusions is that these people often take on very difficult lives as a way of dramatically increasing their own rate of spiritual growth. And I'm wondering if you can comment on that with regards to viewers in our audience who may be experiencing challenging lives themselves.
Thank you. So it's a thrill to be here. I'm glad to be with the two of you. What I found over many years of guiding clients in regression work is that, first of all, often my clients are not young souls, simply because, and probably viewers of your program, what you wonderful Death Chicks do, is they're not young souls either, because young souls don't tend to be interested in this topic. So many of my clients, yes, are souls of a beyond mid-range of soul evolution. And when we're beyond mid-range of soul evolution, we take on, we might say, more challenging life contracts, life agreements, and we do that for two reasons. One, to advance our own soul evolution, we might say more quickly, and we also come into body to be of service on this planet and to be of service to advance culture, life, the way we treat each other, and so on and so forth on this planet. So challenging lives sometimes look like, to focus on the human word death, which I like to call transition instead of death, but someone's life could be tied to a heavy contract, and so, but could be illness, could be relationship issues, could be work-related issues, but anything that might feel more challenging than not challenging is a demanding life contract.
And what exactly is a life contract?
Okay, good. Big, little tiny short questions with, supposedly big answers. So I might just be clear that I guide regression. I guide clients to use their own intuition to uncover their own understanding of who they are as a soul, why they're in body. So what I have learned from many, many clients, and my work is sort of like, I say that I understand things, and why do I say I understand them? Because far more than one client, numerous clients have basically without me telling them, they are telling me that we might say between lives or before we come into body, we essentially sit down with our spiritual guides and we begin to have a discussion about, well, so what's my upcoming life going to look like? Am I going to be light-skinned or dark-skinned? Am I going to be tall or short, or tend to be more on the heavy side, or tend to be more on the very, very thin side? What part of the world am I going to be born into? Will I have, a family? Will I be the child of a single parent? Et cetera, et cetera. So we plan our life before we come into body. And what I always want to say, so that people don't misunderstand, we always have free will. Nothing's written in concrete. I mean, obviously your skin colors or something like that, tall, short, that, of course, is sort of written in concrete. But we plan our life with positive purpose, not with negative or malevolent purpose.
That's very good to know. And, Linda, just for a little bit of a context, too, I understand based on your background, your education, you kind of come from academia a little bit more, and academia tends not to look at these kinds of things like past life regression, afterlife, any of the things that we're talking about today, as sort of anything that has merit or validity. And so I love to hear I love soul evolution, but I also love to hear that, that everyday evolution of how people got, like, how does a girl like you get to a place like you are? How does that happen? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, let's see if I'll see if I can give you the thumbnail sketch. And because this is a show about death, I'll just, long ago, when I was about 25 years old, my husband and I've been married a very long time and to a wonderful partner, my husband and I experienced the premature birth and death of our second baby. And that was a hugely traumatic experience when I was 25 years old. And essentially back then, I learned about grief. I learned about what happens when you experience the death of a child. I was not spiritual at that point in my life, so I worked through that experience through a more, you might say, conventional modality, and I was a therapy client and that sort of thing. I found psychotherapy to be enormously helpful. So that led me to return to school after actually our next baby was born, and that is our lovely daughter, who lives not too far from where I live. And so I went back to school, and first I became a master's level psychotherapist, and then I gained my doctoral degree and became a licensed psychologist. Once I was a licensed psychologist, my original colleague, with whom I built a group practice, in about 23 years ago, almost exactly 23 years ago, he passed in his early 30s from a type of lung cancer. And when he passed in 1993, completely unexpectedly, I started having spiritual experiences that at first I thought were kind of weird, and then I realized they were very real. And very, very briefly, what happened is he started talking to me from the other side. He started communicating from the other side, which was a totally new experience for me. And he started showing me scenes of past lives that we had shared. At first, I thought that was the most bizarre thing. I thought, well, maybe I need a psychotherapist or I need medication or something. And it led me to just dive headlong into understanding being a soul, reincarnation, planning lives, and so on and so forth. So that's how I got into this work.
Well, thank God you followed that and didn't sort of poo-poo it as, we've talked about direct experience versus what science tells us is true or not true, and I don't think the tools are there yet to sort of prove or disprove what's happening to people and why this conversation has really kind of taken front and center, and sometimes even in pop culture in ways that were, I think, unexpected and completely beautiful. So thank goodness you followed that path, and then we get more of this research and information from you. So, there's a journey that we're all on, this journey. What would you say is that journey of this soul? I know we talked a little bit about lives that are maybe more fraught with challenges and those kinds of things. What are we doing here, and why are we hanging out on this planet is basically the question.
Like, why in the world would we go through life day by day? Yeah,
it's fun. It's kind of fun.
The easy
experiential. I'm sorry. Go ahead. We kind of stepped over each other a little bit there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Not a problem. So I'm going to use two Eastern terms to give a quick explanation. The two words are words people I'm sure have heard, and Dharma. Okay, and a lot of people understand karma, but they don't necessarily understand Dharma. So my understanding from what I've gained from clients is that essentially we're required to come into body. It's sort of like most states require children to go to school until they're 16. So in order for our soul to evolve and in order for the earth to evolve, we are requested to keep, crazy though it may seem at times, we are requested to come into body in order to progress. Earth is school. And I'm sure some people would say, oh, enough of this school. It's not an easy school. So karma means what happened in past lives that is unresolved. We all have karma or we wouldn't be continuing to be in body. So when I work with clients to uncover past life material, and they tell me, I don't tell them, so I don't work as a medium. I work to guide the client to access this material. But the clients are guided to understand their karma, missteps that we can clean up in life today, that we can alter in life today, and Dharma. And Dharma means what are our soul accomplishments and intentions? What have we done well, and what are we here in body to continue doing? So that is essentially what I've learned from clients. That's why we come into body on this planet.
Wow. So when you talk about Dharma, which is our soul's intention, are there well, actually let's go karma and Dharma. With karma, you mentioned that there's the possibility of cleaning it up in this lifetime. And I get this image of you clean up a misstep here or a misunderstanding here, and then somehow it like reverts back and fixes or changes what's happened to create the progression of your life. Is that sort of an explanation? Okay. Okay.
It would be sort of like, okay, you can't, to use an analogy, let's just say you cannot graduate from high school without passing basic algebra. And when you took algebra in 9th grade, you didn't get a passing grade. So in order to get out of high school, you have to retake algebra, get a passing grade, get a C or above, for example, and then you can graduate from high school. So if Linda was a neglectful parent in one or more past lives, my guides are going to encourage me to come into body, become a parent, and not be a neglectful parent, and therefore I pass that requirement of learning at the soul level.
Okay, that makes sense. And then as we move on to Dharma, which is a soul intention, how do we know what that is? And does karma interfere or interrupt sometimes that soul intention in moving forward or moving in the direction of what we're trying to manifest here in terms of our soul's purpose or intention?
Right. So let me see how to make that simple. So our Dharma in our current life is what we might call our life purpose, or life purposes. Yeah. Common question that clients bring to a regression session when I work with them is, what's my life purpose or purposes? Why am I here? So we learn about life purpose in a regression session, but I would say to listeners, you can discover your life purpose by just looking at, what are you passionate about? What really, juices you? What really interests you? Is it being a parent? Is it doing a show like this? Is it running a business of some sort? What is that? And so that's our Dharma. And sometimes, kind of related to what you were asking, Patty, sometimes the more evolved we become as a soul, we take on a very complicated mix of karma and dharma, because our guides are wanting to see if we can deal, this, what you focus on in this program just makes so much sense. It's like, what do we do? How do we manage life if our mother dies when we're 7 and we marry our beloved when we're 32, and our beloved dies, when we're 40? Wow. And so what's our intention? Well, and I don't mean to minimize how incredibly difficult that would be. Of course it would be incredibly difficult. But then what does that person do? How do they manage? Yeah.
And that's sort of what the big mystery is, how we go forth from those scenarios that happen in our life. And there are choices, as you say, there's free will. We can go in this direction, that direction, or that direction. But is there one direction that's going to get closer to this purpose? And can we find that information out in regressions?
So, yeah, always hard to explain in very, very straightforward detail. Yes, so a variety of responses. Yes, many clients will discover their life purpose, or I prefer to say purposes, because I don't think we just have a life purpose. That is one of the reasons clients come for regression. But what I think is so important to say to the listeners is, in our human culture, we say to someone, well, what do you do? Kind of work do you do? What, life purpose sometimes looks very structured, like me, like traveling and teaching and writing books and blah, blah, blah. Although I'm also a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. Those are very important parts of my life. But for others, their life purpose is, and I always think about this particular client when I say this, their purpose is to be a really good friend, to be the best kind of friend they can be, and that's why they're in body. Not that they don't have other aspects of their life, but they're in body to be a consistent, supportive, authentic friend.
Nice. And how, so when we're just moving to talk to the between life stuff, and I'm thinking about the journey of the soul over many lives, can you talk about what that's about, and how let's use this example of being a good friend. How might that look in a soul's journey over many lives?
Well, maybe a couple of thoughts about that, Misty. Let's just say that 3 lives ago, my life purpose was to be a very, you might say high-quality friend. And I kind of messed up. let's just say I was more interested in my own needs than the needs of my friend, or, let's just say I incurred some karma. So, in a subsequent life, again, as part of the purpose of my current life. And another way to look at it, and there's a chapter in my second book about what I'm about to talk about. I have learned from clients over 23 years of regression that our soul has an archetype. That our soul has a characteristic nature that is unchanging lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, that has something to do with the basic orientation of who we are, our sort of our approach to life, our sort of, I love the French phrase raison d'être, which means reason for being, so that there are 7 possibilities there are 7 archetypes. They're all important. They're all of equal value, but some of them are much more like, my job is to create change in certain parts of life, change in an organization, change in a family. Another person's archetype might be to balance all people's needs, to balance everybody's needs, which is a softer, more right-brained archetype. And that is the nature or the character style that soul carries lifetime to lifetime to lifetime.
Mm. Yeah, that's lovely. I don't know if you have a list of those to share, or you know them off the top of your head, but I think, are these characteristics or archetypes, I'm sorry, are they sort of recognizable as we're a human? If we went through that list, we would say, oh, I think that's me, or is that something that's more fleshed out as you do the kind of work that you do?
I think that it varies person to person, Patty. A lot of people, after reading my book and reading about these archetypes, they may have read that chapter in my book and they've already begun to sort of chew on, so which archetype might fit for me. And then when we do regression work, because we can uncover past life details as well as soul level details, in working with the client's guides, often we can get a clearer sense of, like sometimes a client comes in and they'll say, Linda, I can't quite decide. I think that I'm either archetype 1 or archetype 4. And then we'll do regression, and based on certain aspects of past lives and talking to the guides of the client, which is a part of the regression session that I do, then they gain a deeper sense. But some people can fairly well figure it out just by picking through the 7 styles of soul character and figure it out.
And seeing what speaks to them, I'm sure. No, I think that's fascinating, because when you talk with people in general, there seems to be, I don't know if these would be soul aspects that are shining through, but you can sort of take some characteristics and apply them to certain people. And I'm fascinated to read your book to be able to find out what those are, because I would think that when someone is working maybe against an archetype, that there might be more distress or more challenges in life. I don't know if that's the case, but maybe taking on things that aren't really them and not living out from their particular archetype. Is that?
Yes, I think that's true. It's like if you don't embrace what your basic nature is, and you try to make it something that you're not, thinking, oh, well, I should be more like this, but that's not really your core nature, it's really difficult for us.
Mm-hmm. Right. And kind of bringing it back to parenting and the parents you choose and the karma and the Dharma and how that can all play in. And and then I guess bringing it around to how, if we have this information, how can that help us here on Earth, and also how does that help our soul to advance and step up, get past grade 9 algebra?
Yeah, a good way to ask it. I'll give you an example, and examples sometimes of my own life are easier to comprehend and share. So let me see if I can make this kind of simple. So my mother passed about 2 years ago in her 90s, and long story short, I just never really had an easy, cozy, comfortable relationship with my mother. At times, I would just get very frustrated with my mother's basic personality. After my father passed and my mother was not doing so well living alone, we moved her closer to where we live, and she was in an assisted living facility. And sometimes I would get quite frustrated, but something inside of me led me. I didn't understand it until I uncovered a past life. But something inside of me said, Linda, you're going to make sure your mother's needs are met until she takes her final breath. So that is, in fact, and I'm very glad that I had that impetus. So I did that. But within the last maybe 18 months of Mom's life, I uncovered a past life where my mother in current life was the soul of my daughter in a past life. And in the past life, when she was my daughter, married to her father left the marriage early on after our daughter was born. And I was completely lost and completely unhappy and bereft. And when our daughter was 10 years old, I willed myself to die, basically of a broken heart, because of the father having left. When I learned that I had, in a way, abandoned my daughter at age, she was about 10 years old when I abandoned her. When I learned I'd abandoned her, and I learned that she was the soul of my mother, I then understood the need to basically hang with my mom until she passed in life today, to clean up that algebra class, to clean up that karma of having kind of walked out on her when she was 10 years old. Yeah.
Wow. And so in doing that, once you uncovered that, did it make your human interaction with your mother easier, or did it just overlay so that you understood the purpose even if it didn't make it easier?
I mean, I think I'd say it made of why I needed to be sure Mom was cared for, and it made me, at times, certainly not all the time, more patient, more able to deal with it. You know, you guys probably know, as do many listeners, when someone is passing, and especially if it's an elderly person and dementia has grown and they can't really care for themselves any longer and all that, it becomes very challenging. There were lots of staff problems at assisted living because my mom was a fairly demanding personality, so I had to keep dealing with a lot of those issues. Having that concept in my head of why I was hanging out, taking care of Mom in all the ways that, you know, I tried to do my best, yeah, it made it easier.
Mm-hmm. That's compelling. I think that is hugely compelling for this kind of work, because there are many people that wouldn't hang in there and not understand why, or blame and push, you know, point the finger. I think that's compelling because I've always been, well, I love stories, first of all, and whether someone believes these are true or not, they are positive stories we can tell ourselves about what's happening. And, you know, I personally believe in the huge power of this regression to inform us of many things. And that's one beautiful example where, you know, someone, if they weren't cleaning up the karma, might just say, you know what, not my problem, not my issue. Which, by the way, means another ninth grade algebra class that you got to clean up later, right? And it gets harder. Is that how we see it? That was a great metaphor, Misty. That's right. Because, by the way, I hated algebra, and I'm a little worried now that we're talking about that. I was a geometry girl all the way, and I remember in college, I did skip over a lot of that algebra, and I took, what do they say, math, a cultural approach. So that's why I'm having some issues today. I don't know. We'll have to check that out.
You know,
Linda?
maybe one. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump back to the idea of the soul wisdom, and we mentioned it at the beginning of the call about some souls being less advanced than others, and you mentioned how the viewers on the show are probably more advanced souls because less advanced souls aren't interested in this kind of stuff. So can you talk about the soul's journey in advancing in wisdom, and do we get to the point where, hey, you know, I've done it and I don't have to go back anymore, or, you know, can we make the choice, or how does that work? How do we get there? Take us there.
Yeah, well, I certainly have a lot of clients and people that, you know, I train people in regression, I do all kinds of things, but I have a lot of people who say, Linda, I'm done. I don't want to come back here anymore. This is a tough place to, you know, to live here on earth, you know, et cetera, et cetera. The way I understand that, Misty, is that let me see if I love analogies, and I think analogies explain things even better. So if you are, and I always hate to use education as an example, so what I want listeners to know is I'm not saying it's better to have lots of education and worse not to have lots of education. It's just a good example. So as we evolve as a soul, we gain wisdom. As we gain wisdom, we are expected by our guides in the higher realm to carry greater responsibility. As we carry greater responsibility, we are given, you might say, more challenging tasks, but also higher order tasks, so to speak. So like if you're a soul and you are, I'm thinking out loud as I talk to make sure this is clear. It's like we have to first gain that basic degree in soul wisdom before we can begin operating as a guide. And I would say to your listeners, and I'm saying this because of what clients tell me, we all have spiritual guides or guidance. Call them guardian angels, call them what you want to call them. We all have guides, and we tend to have more than one. As we advance in wisdom, we take on a greater responsibility, and we begin to serve as guides. And there are, if people can kind of see my hand, there are levels of guides. Like we work up a ladder of a guide at a lower level is like a junior guide, and a guide at a higher level is more of a senior guide. Yeah, and we all have guides. I'll just add in, the more evolved we are as a soul, the more evolved our guides.
Mm-hmm. So as we grow, so do the teachers that connect with us. Let me ask you this. Do our guides change with each incarnation, or do we have, no, that would make sense according to what you just said. I was thinking that maybe we have a guide that's connected to us through life after life after life, but as we evolve, maybe the guides evolve too. I have no clue, but...
yeah, that's another great question. Yes and no, and why I say yes and no is we might have, oh, let me back up an extra step. At any one time, we always have a primary guide. We have a lead guide that is sort of the first line of support for us. And then we have a team. Our lead guide might be our lead guide through a number of repetitive lifetimes. And then we might reach a point where we shift. We might shift guides because we've evolved to a certain level and we're going to take on a more highly evolved guide. So it's really yes and no.
It's going to sound crazy, but you know what? I recently was connecting with my guides, and I swear to you, my lead guide looks like Keith Urban. No lie. And let me tell you, I was quite happy about that. And he has an Australian accent. But I think it was to get me to listen up, because I do think he's hot, and I think he's amazing. But seriously, it got brought to me. It was a way to grab my attention, which it did. And I've been listening ever since. It's really amazing. And I mean that seriously. I know it sounds tongue-in-cheek. And now, once I got past that, I feel like I'm more connected to to this infusion of what we might call intuition. Everybody has it, but it's almost a higher level than that now. And I don't always follow it. I don't always understand it. I don't always get it. But, you know, I didn't even ask for Keith Urban to show up. He just did in guide form. So it works. It works.
I love that.
I'm wondering how, so Patty's had some connection with her guide. I'm wondering, how can we connect with our guides and or to our past lives or our lives in between? Now, there's 3 questions there, and I'm just going to put it on the table for you to pick and answer whichever one you like, or all.
Okay, and I'm actually writing myself notes to try to remember what you're asking, Misty. So first, let's talk about intuition, and this may be very elementary, so I'll say it rather quickly. We're all intuitive, but we have, I like to say, approximately 5 different ways that we're intuitive. The first one is some of us are clairvoyant, and I don't mean clairvoyant like you're some famous medium or channel necessarily, but some of us are stronger at the intuitive visual cues. But some of us aren't strong with our clairvoyance. That's not our, kind of our best skill. Some of us are clairsentient, meaning we are very capable of receiving intuitive information through our ability to feel, through emotions. And some of us are very capably clairsentient. Our guides sometimes will motion inside of us in order to get our attention. Sentient, I always like to kind of use my fingers here. So clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairauditory, clairaudient, which most people I'm sure know. That means you almost feel like clairsomatic. So clairsomatic means your guides get your attention through a body signal. It might be a pressure in a place on your back. It might be a tightening in your throat. It might be a twitching in one of your eyelids. But it's a body symptom that is the way your guide says, hello, I'm here. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, but extremely important, because we tend to deny this last one, is what we might call claircognition, meaning our guides connect with us through thought. They put ideas in our mind through our own cognitive abilities. We think we're making up those thoughts, but we're not. That's simply our guides dropping thoughts into our mind, and that happens for me a lot. It's that classic example of, someone you haven't talked to in a number of days or even a number of months keeps coming into your mind and into your mind and into your mind. You text, you email, you call, and they say, how did you know I really needed to talk to you today? And you say, well, I must be psychic. My intuition told me that. But that's how that works. Yeah, so that's how if we trust we're intuitive, and we practice practice our intuition. I always say to people, find a regular spiritual practice, and I don't care what that is. I mean, that could be traditional prayer, that could be walking, it could be watching the sunset 3 times a week, or it could be traditional Eastern sitting meditation. It doesn't really matter. Use some kind of intuitive practice, spiritual intuitive practice, and trust what comes to you, whether you're looking at connecting with your guides or trying to intuit elements of past lives, or looking to understand, you know, what's your next step in your current life. What do your guides want you to do? I'm convinced when my partner passed in '93, at a soul level, the soul of my partner, who I came to understand, now I know I've shared many, many lives with that soul, but in '93, when I started having spiritual experiences, I'm convinced that my guides, the soul of my partner, and my soul, or what we call higher self, had agreed to open these doors for me, and then I had free will to decide what to do with the open doors.
And that's why I said in the beginning, I'm really glad that you did open those doors, because, I mean, I guess we wouldn't know any different. We wouldn't be here talking to you, I suppose, but how lovely and rich it is when you go down a path that seems to feel right for you, if I'm reading it correctly. That seems like you really embody. It's not just that you're sharing what your experience is, that it really is you. Like a soul.
Patty, I love this work. I'll be 70 late this year. I'm still working full-time and more. I love what I do. It's the most fascinating work I've ever done in my life. I used to be a general psychologist, so I had a general private practice for many, many years. That was fine. That was okay. But I love this far more. It's fascinating. It feels purposeful, and yeah,
Absolutely.
gives me many opportunities. Yeah.
And what a
wonderful
wonderful example of your soul purpose at work, because many people, by the time they're almost 70, and you're looking good, girl, by the way, would not want to find themselves anywhere near work, so to speak, you know, past retirement age. And so here you are, looking fabulous, feeling great, loving what you do. What a testament to really understanding your soul purpose on a human level at the, you know, time and place on Earth. Really something. Again, very compelling.
And I would say, Patty, that, you know, say this to the listeners, we have to take risks. I mean, I'm sure both of you have elements in your own lives. It was a risk for me to start doing spiritual work. You know, 23 years ago, the bulk of my client referrals came from medical doctors. So I thought, you know, oh my gosh, what are they going to think about, you know, Dr. Linda Bachmann, you know, doing this kind of work? They're going to think I'm a quack. And I had to get to the point of saying, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm passionate about this work, and if certain people think I'm a quack, then that's what they think.
That's a huge risk. That's really a huge risk, and you hear about that from people like, I'm familiar with Dr. Larry Dawsey, cardiologist,
Yes.
who really brought prayer into his practice, and a spiritual aspect. Dr. Brian Weiss, one of your colleagues, who, you know, it's a huge risk, and many people shut that down.
Right.
To stay. It's kind of the reason I was asking that question about what happens when you go against an archetype. I think I know that even if it's not against an archetype, but if I don't feel really good or what's the word I'm looking for, just feeling like a particular decision is the right direction, I hurt. It could be sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally. And I think that could be a guidance system for us all, if we're really more in tune. But I also recognize the places where I really have overridden so many times. And when I look at that, I can really pinpoint a level of exhaustion that doesn't seem too late to change, but can be scary, as you say. Can be scary. So I really honor you for doing that. It takes a lot of guts, a lot of good guts.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Patty, you bring up Dr. Larry Dossey, because early on in my spiritual journey, I learned of Larry Dossey. I went to conferences and listened to Larry Dossey, and then I had the great fortune. I now know him fairly well. He's a friend. He endorsed my second book. I highly, highly respect Dr. Larry Dossey, but it's partly because of what you just said, is because he's a medical doctor, but he's spiritually oriented.
Yes. Yeah. I was introduced to him early on, probably not as early as you were, and I would expect that it was great that you could connect with somebody who also took those kinds of risks. But I do find it fascinating. Those to me are like, well, you are a pioneer, or somebody like Larry Dossey is a pioneer and a kind of a way shower for those of us who are,
Right.
you know, going after things that are important to us, that speak to us, that we really know deeply in our bones, but not everybody's going to grab a hold of. And how do we manage and navigate?
Right.
Sometimes with grace, sometimes not as gracefully. But I think the important part is to keep in that direction. At least for me, and I battle with that kind of thing all the time. Not that I have any professional, well, in some ways, because I do work with hospices, and hospices kind of want to end the conversation at death. They really don't want to go on further. And so now I'm introducing some of these concepts, and some people, you can totally shut that out, but other people are hungry for it, because if they're in the death business, how can we talk about death and not what comes after, as far as I'm concerned? But maybe that's too.
That's right. I agree.
Definitely. Well, you know, we have about just a few minutes left. I know Linda has an engagement after this, but I have a burning question, and I'm wondering about the idea of living two lives simultaneously, which I've heard of, and I'm just, you know, how? And alongside of that, and equally is pinging on my curiosity, is do we have lives other than our lives here on Earth?
Good one, Miss.
Yeah, great. Wonderful questions. So let me start with the first one. The bottom line is yes, at times our soul resides in more than one body simultaneously. Just so listeners know that most people do, we always have a higher self. So a portion of our soul energy resides in the spiritual realm, whether we're incarnate or not, or maybe better said, when we're incarnate, we always have an aspect of our soul that remains in spirit. That's what we call, I sometimes just shorten it and call it high self. At times, yes, we make agreements to be in two bodies simultaneously for two basic reasons: to speed up our own evolution, and to speed up our, you might say, cleaning up of karma, and to have a greater impact on the planet, to have a greater impact on humanity's need for growth.
Now, I have to jump in, and I'm just bursting.
So the next question, and I'm glad you brought it up. I sometimes, yeah, go ahead.
What if we need ourselves? Is that twisted humor?
Is that like
an
antimatter?
Yeah. Yeah. It's rare, Misty, but yes, I have honestly worked with clients, and I legitimately believe they know. It's called a split incarnation. I've worked with clients, and I legitimately believe incarnation, and there are various ways to be able to tell, including, not that we call them splits, not that splits have to look like twins, but there tend to be some similar characteristics, especially facial characteristics, as well as life circumstance characteristics. So it does happen. Yeah. Not common, but it does happen. Then the other piece of the question you asked, Misty, let me see if I can make this simple. There is a chapter in my second book about souls and lives from other than Earth, and I'm actually working on book number 3. It will be all about souls that incarnate other than Earth and what kinds of skills and wisdom do they bring here. So, you know, if we as humans right now thought that, you know, we thought and we were so egocentric that we said, well, there's only life on Earth. My client work would completely disagree with that. Many of us have had lives elsewhere, and we have, right now, there is a, we might say a greater than average, a larger than average percentage of souls on Earth who have had more of their lives not on this planet. And the simple overriding characteristic of what I call ET souls is that these souls come from other celestial locations that are already highly evolved. Therefore, they don't have war, they don't have abuse, they don't say, I'm better because my skin's color's right and you're worse because your skin color's wrong, or, you know, whatever. They are healthy environments that may not be quite like a human environment. Some are, some aren't. But yes, there is life other than on this planet, because I have clients go there where I never brought that up with the client in advance at all.
So interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. I know you've got to go, and I've got a burning question. That's a great way to put it, Misty. Why is it that we don't recognize, sense, or maybe some of us sense a past life, but wouldn't necessarily be able to identify it as such? What's the point of not letting us know, other than the fact that if you had 600 lives operating in one body, it could get kind of confusing. Actually, sometimes I feel there's that many voices in my head. But, yeah, why don't we get access?
Right.
Why no access on a sort of a conscious level?
Yeah. So 2 responses to that, Patty. One is, you really enjoy being with, you have people that you really have conflict with and you can't solve it no matter how hard you try. You have places in the world that are on your bucket list that you say, I have to travel to Scotland before I die, or whatever. We do have clues about our past lives, but the answer to why is certain information from past lives blocked is because you wouldn't clean up your karma. So let's just say you meet someone, this is an overly romanticized example, but you meet someone and you fall deeply in love, and then suddenly, you know, you begin to have an everyday life, and there are things that they're doing that are just pushing your buttons right and left. And then you suddenly become scared about staying in relationship with that person. If something happened in a past life and there was something very traumatic in the relationship you might have had in a past life with that person, you might very quickly say, I want out of this relationship, rather than working harder to resolve it. And I'm certainly not saying that we should stay in all, you know, I'm not saying to listeners, stay in every relationship no matter how hard it is because there's karma to resolve. That's not my message. But just like with my mom, I could have said, oh my gosh, she's so hard, I just don't want to do this. And I didn't uncover that information about her being my daughter until, I think, within about a year of her passing.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Wow. You know, I know Misty and I, sometimes we jump over each other trying to get to the questions that we could really sit at your feet all day long and just dish about what you do, and it's fascinating, it's compelling. You obviously have put your life's work into this, and we're going to have to find another venue because I think people might get a little tired of just Misty and I droning on about all these amazing questions, or maybe not. And we encourage any of our listeners out there to, if you have any questions, put it in our comment stream. Linda, if you're able to check, if not, maybe we can get those questions to you. But you have just been a delight and
sure,
eye-opener, such an eye-opener.
And speaking of our guest and our comment stream, I just want to give a shout out. Roland Taka
It's been a pleasure.
Leslie Marsh is with us, Kim Adams, Leslie Robertson. Thank you, everyone who's watched us live. Julie Sager-Nierenberg, an honorary death chick and a follower for a long time. So thank you, everyone, for the comments that you've made, and for being here live, and for sharing our show, and for following us on Google+. And thank you so much, Linda, for your time today. We are deeply honored to have had you, and wish you all the best, and hope to meet with you live one day. And just on this note, too, Linda will be a featured speaker at the Afterlife Conference, afterlifeconference.com, in St. Louis in the middle of May. Linda also advised us that she's going to be a keynote speaker at an Afterlife Conference in Australia, and I'll try and put something in the comment stream about that. So it's going on all over, and we're happy to be part of it. So from the Death Chicks, we're going to say goodbye for now. I'll pass it over to Patty and Linda. And Linda, maybe just before you go, let people know how they can get in touch with you.
Okay. Yeah, it's totally been my pleasure. Thank you, Patty and Misty. This has just been great. I obviously love talking about this subject. Easiest way to find me would be on the internet. My web address, and it's underneath my name, Raven like the bird, ravenheartcenter.com. Center spelled the American way, not the British way. Ravenheartcenter.com is where you can find me.
Very, very good. Linda, yes, it has been a pleasure. We are going to say goodbye now, but we will be following you and your work, and maybe referencing it again soon when people ask these really important questions. Past lives, future lives, we didn't get there. See, there's something else, which may all be past lives, I don't know, or simultaneous lives. But anyway, it is fascinating. We're so thrilled to have you. Thank you so much. This is the Death Chicks saying goodbye for now, and we'll be talking, I'm sure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.